Hello and welcome to the Wisconsin Drunken History Podcast. We are your hosts, Eric Sturgeon.
And I'm Russell Sorry.
This podcast is about all things Wisconsin, history, music, and culture.
While drinking a few brews.
Though we don't often use strong language, the jokes and the content is not intended for young audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Before we begin the episode, we have to give a huge shout out to the Dangits from Madison, Wisconsin, for providing us with great bluegrass intro you hear at the beginning of every episode. The song Razzle was written by Jamie Lampkins, but is performed on behalf of Tom Wasselchuk and the Dangits. If you have a chance, check these guys out at dang-its.com for upcoming shows, music, or on how to book them for weddings, parties, and etc. Thank you for listening.
Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Eric. We have a few updates to our little podcast here before we begin. Just wanted to let you know that we are now officially on a multitude of different podcasting sites, of which they are Apple Podcast, Google Play, YouTube, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spotify, and Stitcher. We also wanted to let you know that we have our social media presence updated. We have Facebook and Instagram. So definitely go check those out. You can find links to all of that stuff on our own website, including links to our TeePublic site. If you really want to represent our brand and you want our logo on your chest, you can get our stuff at TeePublic right now. You can find links to all of that stuff on our website for the studio. It's called projectcapestudio.com.
Yeah, we also have a local printer working on koozies and shirts that we want to have on hand at all times. We also have a small correction we need to make on episode 1. I had a few beers in me, and I said that Madeline Island wasn't one of the northern islands, and it actually is. If you want to go to the furthest north point, you actually have to go to the Apostle Islands, and the furthest island is actually just called the Outer Island.
And that brings us to our main segment today, Roaring Dan Seavey, the implication of Lake Michigan.
And before we begin, I always divulge my resources to any listeners who want to actually go into this topic a little further. As always, I don't want to do a massive spiel. You can always go to Historical Society, but today we actually use two sources. We use Roaring Dan Seavey by Richard J. Boyd, and I also dug into the book Pirates of Lake Michigan, ? By Lon F. Hefj.
So one of our resources is by Dick Boyd.
Yeah.
Great.
So, Eric, have you actually ever heard of Pirates on Lake Michigan?
No, I've seen a couple of Pirates fans near Bradford Beach, though. So, is that what we're talking about?
Close enough. But if you were to consider a pirate on Lake Michigan, what do you think they'd be dressed?
Skinny jeans and some random old T-shirt.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Okay.
Though this episode doesn't technically talk about a town specifically, as Dan had many bases of operations throughout Wisconsin, I do want to give a shout out. Due to COVID, this has been canceled, but the Pirate Festival in Port Washington is a really neat event.
Yeah.
And yeah, I recommend checking it out next year when they do reopen. They even bring in the famous Milwaukee schooner named the Dennis Sullivan, and it's a festival filled with beer, music, people dressing up as pirates. There's neat harbor bars, restaurants, reenactments, and I highly recommend you check this event out. I want to let everyone know that there are many other cases of piracy on the Great Lakes, but this pirate personally, I wanted to focus our episode on. So the main character in this episode is Dan Seavey. He was famously known during the time period as Roaring Dan Seavey.
Or Skeevy Seavey.
Dan was born in Portland, Maine on March 23rd, 1865. From a young age, he was destined to be on the high seas, lakes. At the age of only 13, he became a sailor and worked aboard local vessels. He was a son to a father who was a schooner captain, so from a young age, all he knew was things nautical. At the age of 18, he joined the United States Navy, and for a while he worked as deputy marshal for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, tracking bootleggers and smugglers on Indian reservations in several states. Roaring Dan first appears in Wisconsin around 1880 at the railhead in Middle Inlet, Wisconsin near Marinette. While in this area, he enjoyed trapping and a bit of farming. He met and married his wife, who was only 14 years old at the time, Mary Plumley, who would become the first of 3 wives Dan would have. In the 1890s, the couple had 2 daughters and had moved to Milwaukee. He purchased a small farm and had several interests within the local waterfront saloons. It is documented in 1896 that he operated and owned a tavern himself, and which introduced him into Frederick Pabst. And if you haven't heard of this guy, we'll definitely have a podcast on him later on.
Yeah, I think I know Fred Pabst pretty well too.
Pabst was a huge force in the area and would constantly talk to Dan about getting into gold mining, specifically the Klondike Gold Rush in Alaska. This venture was not a very good one for him, and he lost most of his money and was forced to return back to Milwaukee. When coming back, he refused to go back to his fatherly duties. Instead, he vanished onto Lake Michigan, which wouldn't be the last time he does this. His wife then bailed on him and returned to northern Wisconsin and remarried to just get away from this asshole, and she changed her name to Mary Silver. In 1900, he resurfaced in Michigan, where he met his second wife, then 22-year-old Zilder Bisner. This was a pretty abusive relationship. She was beaten and threatened often. So basically, this guy is a complete dick. And let me tell you, he doesn't actually get any better. When she confronted him with divorce papers, Seavey again disappeared into the Great Lakes. Seavey later met his last wife, Annie Bradley, and though we don't know everything about this marriage, it did last and was his last marriage. Dan tried many things over his lifespan and was sort of always searching for that get-rich scheme, but before he became what our tale is today, he tried marine transportation, legitimate, trapping, logging, lumber milling, and even some prize fighting. He also indulged in a lot of illegal things, and this is where our lovely tale on Dan will kind of start. He tried smuggling, poaching of animals, bootlegging, and human trafficking.
Do we know if he ever tried selling Kirby vacuums?
That's not on the list, but he might have. It states pimping in a few of the references, but honestly, it was sex trafficking and prostitution trade. And sorry, Dan, you're kind of white.
Yeah.
And this is where our story of him, of being a pirate and therefore mentioned, he was kind of how he obtained his notorious character that we all hear about. And these are the accounts that earned him the title. So the first account of Dan's ways comes to us from the village of Nobbinway in the UP there, guy. He was working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the same time and tracked down a smuggler to this area. The person in question says to Seavey that no lawman could ever take me in hand-to-hand combat. Seavey saw this as a challenge, and the two men quarreled for a few hours. Just beating each other.
Yeah, just going after it.
Or so it is stated. But the fight ended after Seavey tipped a full piano onto the guy. I mean, this dude got Elton John'd.
Yeah, I was going to say he got Liberace'd for sure.
Yeah, destroyed. The man was brought to a medical facility, but ended up dying of his injuries. In the Telegraph, Seavey elegantly writes, "Outlaw expired while resisting arrest." That was all you needed back then, and obviously they didn't have, deep investigations, so he kind of got away with murder.
Yeah, and homicide by 88 key.
He quickly grew in reputation as a tough brawler. He was known to have beaten many challengers and even became a prize fighter. In Frankfurt in the winter of 1904, Mitch Love, a well-known pugilist of the time from downstate, was one of the such cases. There was a ring set up, and the ring was actually made with ice all surrounding it in the frozen harbor, and they just piled up snow to have the ring edges. Around 200 people were there to witness the fight. The fights were all bare knuckles, so there was no gloves involved. This was just knuckle to knuckle. Dan beat the man into a bloody pulp, and required medical attention was required. Dan cleaned up the contest and made a decent sum of money. As mentioned before, Seavey was a poacher. There was a story where he would set up illegal traps out in the water to catch fish. Now, Seavey was technically a marshal, so had a gun on him at most of the times. Other poachers would come and try to take his trap, which was illegally set in the first place, and a bell would ring, and Seavey would cap off a shot to scare them away. Due to him being a marshal, he could have just told authorities that he set the trap for poachers, but he obviously sold his catches for money. He used his title basically to get away with crimes.
Well, that's the thing. He was one of the first accounts of dirty cops.
Exactly, and due to his confidence level, He also dabbled in horse racing markets of Chicago. And this is kind of cool because he actually screwed over some Illinois guys.
There you
go. He would actually talk up and say that his hay was a special type of hay that would enhance the horse's stamina. And these people in Chicago actually bought it. And he used to load up barges and drive them down there and made just a ton of money this way.
Yeah, this is the stuff that you see on the counter at the gas station that says it's going to definitely improve everything you've ever done.
Right, and this ended up working for him. So to keep you guys in the mood, we decided to play some rigging that was actually done here in Lake Michigan in the background. And this is the part of the story where Dan Seavey actually starts to commit crimes on the water. So there used to be a loophole in the system where parts of the lake were technically not under any jurisdiction. You could basically set sail, and if you were on the lake, nobody could arrest you for the crimes you were committing. So he would sail a barge and set up floating bordellos. That's right. I mean, he's actually having prostitutes on his boat. He was able to sell women's and collect the profit. Obviously, the law did not want to get involved, but had to say they couldn't do anything because of the loophole. He was not the only one doing this at the time, and Prohibition was going on, so sailors would also set up bars and, drinking establishments right on the water. And with that, I was trying to come up with some names for some floating bordellos myself, and my immature brain came up with these floating whorehouse names, including the SS Skeeter, the Rub and Tugboat, which is also bringing a new meaning to the word stabbing cabin, with slogans like, hop in your dinghy, and we'll touch your thingy. Eric, do you have any names picked out for your floating bordellos?
I got a few. Bass to Mouth, Blow Jib, Blue Vein Bobber, and Filthy Oar. Those are just a couple. I have given this no thought, right?
And this is where Dan actually receives his piracy charge. He purchased a 42-foot schooner named the Wanderer. And you can see a picture of this on our social media. I actually got a really nice picture of it. On June 11th of 1908, Dan, along with 2 crew members, stole a small schooner in Grand Haven, Michigan, which initiated a chase with federal authorities. He gained the ship, the Nellie Johnson, by having Captain R.J. McCormick and his crew in a local saloon where he enticed them drinking wildly and giving them shots. The crew became so drunk and immobilized that the entire crew all passed out, and the 2 members along with Dan hopped on the ship and headed off to Chicago, where they're hoping to sell off the cedar lumber that was already loaded up. After reaching the harbor, they were turned away from even the shadier markets, so they had to try other ports. By this time, McCormick alerted federal authorities, and what had happened on June 20th, 9 days later, the federal ship, the Tuscarora, left Chicago in pursuit of Dan. The Tuscarora was captained by Preston Uberoth, while McCormick and U.S. Deputy Marshal Tom Currier, along with Dan, were on the boat along with Dan's arrest warrant. The Tuscarora was a faster ship than the Nellie Johnson, and was also a 178-foot steel gunboat, cruised up the eastern shore, stopping at all ports and known black market ports, which proved to be slow and tedious. They had to stop in every single one of these and actually ask questions. And due to the connections of the marshal, they phoned all of the lighthouses and life-saving stations. Eventually, they got a hit up in Frankfort, where Seavey had hid the ship, the Nellie Johnson, on a local area river. They headed north and paused in Manistee, where they had decided to refuel the ship and proceeded under the cover of night. They had suspicions that someone would have alerted Dan, so they didn't want him to leave. And while docking in Point Bestie, the following afternoon, one of the crew members spotted the Wanderer leaving the harbor. Dan's getting out of town. He's shitting his pants now.
Yep.
So, well, they lifted the anchor and darted after the ship in full pursuit. The Tuscarora then let off one cannon shot along the waterline next to the ship, which finally caused Seavey to force him to stop because he didn't want to risk his ship. The crew boarded the ship, and Seavey was arrested and brought back to Chicago. On June 30th, Seavey was put up on charges of not piracy, like the original charge, but mutiny and sedition on the high seas. The media sensation due to this initial piracy charge is what branded him, and it was not the actual charge. In the end, Dan Seavey was somehow able to get out of all charges, though he clearly stole the ship. There's no doubt about it. There's so much evidence out there. And there really is no clear answer on how he was able to get off on all these charges. There was obviously speculation and rumors. He never admitted to stealing the ship, and they think that he had a really good lawyer that got him off of all this stuff.
Yeah, he probably had Johnny Cochran, but also at the same token, I mean, out there on the high seas, it's the Implication.
And due to all the newspapers, he was officially branded as a pirate. And to his death, he always claimed that he won the Nellie Johnson in a poker game. Sure.
Yeah,
I
that's generally what people are willing to put up in a poker game. A ship full of cedar lumber.
Seavey also made a significant amount of money doing poaching, as noted before. So one story, not 100% confirmed, there's evidence of it, but a lot of people don't know if it was Seavey, and he was never charged with it, is there was a company known as Booth Fisheries, and they attempted competing with Seavey's venison poaching operation, and it's said that Seavey attached a cannon on their ship and actually sunk this ship and killed everyone on board, which is pretty messed up.
That's intense.
I don't know if he really did it, but I think because being branded as a pirate, I think they kind of pointed the finger at him specifically.
Right. You got him on a couple other things. Why not just throw this one at him?
Yeah, and he also was known for stealing cargo ships by using a thing called moon cussing. And the term moon cussing, if you're a player of Skyrim, you know what this means already. It's not when you actually pull down your pants and you show your ass and someone just starts swearing at you. It's not. It doesn't mean that at all.
Yeah, this isn't Randy Moss at Lambeau Field.
It's actually where someone alters a sea light by extinguishing or an existing light or placing false lights, which leads the ship to crash into the rocks. And it's obviously an easy technique to steal cargo. You just direct them right in the shore and they crash right on the rocks. You take your stuff, get out of there.
Yeah.
So in the end, the Wanderer was eventually destroyed by a fire, which speculation it may have been the alcohol that was on board. Seavey retired in the 1920s and settled in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, and later died in a nursing home in 1949 at the age of 84. He was known to be religious towards the very end of his life and would often be seen carrying a Bible around, which, I mean, when you live a life of complete sin, this kind of is like the standard go-to, like, please save me, I did all these terrible things.
Right. You run to the, I'm a newly, Christian and just trying to make my way into heaven now.
Yeah, for some of these crimes, I don't know if a Hail Marys are going to do it for you, but you can give it a shot.
No, yeah.
And today, honestly, I wish more people knew about Dan Seavey, which is kind of why we're doing this episode. I heard about him, actually, for the first time watching an episode of Warehouse 13. And if you want to watch this episode, it's on Season 4. The episode's called Lost and Found. And to keep the legend alive, Great Lakes Distillery actually distills a rum called Roaring Dan's Rum to pay homage to the pirate. He was also a character in a season 12 episode of Murdoch Mysteries, which is kind of neat. So he has been featured. He's just kind of not well known, even within our state, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Eric, after you heard this story, what do you think of this guy?
Well, I mean, throughout this whole recording, we've been sipping on a couple of shots of this stuff named after this very infamous gentleman. He sounds like the exact opposite of a gentleman. In fact, he is a dirty, dirty man that he's a jack of all of the bad trades is really what it sounds like. He's not an educated man. He has the streetwise, but honestly, I mean, he is just a filthy, filthy man.
Yeah, he definitely lives up to the pirate name. And, I think he took a lot of these like federal legitimate jobs to kind of see how the system works so we could actually find a way or loopholes in the system to get away with all the crimes he committed.
Exactly. It's like that Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Catch Me If You Can. You get on the inside so that way you can educate yourself that way on how to, discover loopholes and ways around stuff.
But yeah, thank you for listening, and we're going to take a quick break and get back to you. And welcome back. So to keep our pirate theme going here, today's music is actually not local, but we were actually lucky enough to get approval from Napalm Records, specifically Nadir. Shout outs and thank you for getting back to us so quickly. He actually gave us permission to use a song. The song is by Alestorm, and they're actually from Perth, Scotland. But the song does feature a local bar. It's actually a basement bar called the Sunken Norwegian. So huge thank you to Napalm Records, and without further ado, here is Alestorm, the Sunken Norwegian.
Thanks again to Napalm Records and Alestorm. That song, The Sunken Norwegian, that's another one of those tracks that just gets you amped up and makes you want to have a good time out there on the Bass to Mouth. Our next segment is the beer review. Today, we actually have in front of us the Mutiny IPA from Capital Brewery. This is considered an American IPA. At 6.2% ABV, this one does have the bitterness of the IPA with a little bit of pine and a citrus aroma as well that you can taste. I enjoy IPAs. I have a maybe one or two, and that's max. You don't want to go over that, at least in my opinion. This one's kind of in the middle of the road of an IPA. It's not overboard, but it definitely packs a little bit of a punch. So again, not too wild, definitely drinkable, but it does have that punch. So you gotta definitely tailor back on it a bit. Capital Brewery is another one of those tours that Russ and I have actually been on together. That one's in Middleton, Wisconsin.
Yeah, the tour was really good. Unfortunately, we had a newer tour guide. He was you go to like Lakefront, these guys joke around and they're really like bubbly, enthusiastic, and this guy was just kind of like plain level.
Yeah, definitely newer, and you know how you are on a newer job. You're a little bit uncomfortable. You don't have that same level of confidence. So I believe that was the only thing. Now that that's been probably 4 years ago, I'm sure he's probably fitting right in, and that's awesome. But yeah, normally tour guides are just, they're really loose, and they're able to just off the cuff a lot of history and a couple of one-liners that are fun and play off of the crowd, almost doing crowd work like comedians do. And this he's really good at just delivering the information on the script. So he was more verbatim.
Exactly. And I'm in the same boat with you in the IPAs. Like, usually what I do is I'll drink a couple of these and then, I'll switch back to a lighter beer because I want to have like a good taste up front. And then, you don't want to get really trash because these are 6.2%. You have a 6-pack and you're not going to be feeling good the next day.
Yeah, it's just a heavy beer. It sits in the gut, and it's like you're eating a whole loaf of bread. So having one or two, definitely manageable. And these things have a lot more flavor than your typical light beers. So you can definitely indulge a bit, if you will. Just like when you order a dessert at restaurants, they only bring you out a small dessert. They don't bring you out the full entree dessert, So this is really more of those indulgences that you just have, one or two just to get that taste, but then you can easily switch back to something else, your other cocktail, a light beer, something else.
Yeah, and for Grateful Dead fans, they no longer have it, but you can still sometimes find a shirt in their gift shop. They actually used to make the Grateful Red.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and I'm a Deadhead.
Yeah, and the shirt's really cool. It's tie-dye. It says Grateful Red on it. It's really cool. If you can find them. I don't know if they're making them anymore, but they used to have them in the gift shop. I think last time we were there, they weren't making the beer, but you could get the shirt.
Nice.
And yeah, if you're in Middleton, one other thing I recommend, I was a skateboarder in school, and now that I'm in my 30s, I still skate once in a while, but I always have to have a little beer in my system before I end up going over to the skate park. But there's one actually right across the street, so liquor up and get on over there. I don't know if that's the best advice, but
yeah, definitely. There's also a mustard museum over there too, right? In the same town.
Yeah, actually, the mustard museum is really cool, and I love mustard. I put it on a lot of things. I eat like raw vegetables and dip it in there.
Same here.
But a funny story is they have a game downstairs. It's like a ring toss game, and Mike and Sturge both played, and I don't think either one of them actually rung it, but they ended up just grabbing some mustard anyway. So,
it's there for the taking, in my opinion. The game is just kind of like a try it if you want, but definitely have some of this mustard over here. So yeah, definitely. I walked home with some jalapeno mustard, and then one of my favorites is which is I think the Carolina Heat, and that thing is just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, they also have some pretty good, if you're into curry and Indian dishes, they have a really good curry mustard. It's my favorite one that they offer, and that's the one I buy every time.
Nice.
And yeah, that'll do it for the beer review segment.
So along with the Mutiny IPA from Capital, we've also been sipping on the Dan Seavey's rum from Great Lakes Distillery. And we actually had a chance to interview Ross, the marketing director at Great Lakes Distillery.
All right, without further ado, here is Ross, the marketing manager from Great Lakes Distillery. Can you tell us a little bit about Great Lakes and events you have coming up, etc.?
Sure. Great Lakes Distillery was formed in 2004 by Guy Rayhorst. Our owner was a home winemaker, home brewer. Then he was at the bar one day and noticed that there were a bunch of beers he could buy from Milwaukee and Wisconsin, and a bunch of, I guess primarily beers, not so much wine, but even had California wine at the time. But yeah, he could buy a beer from 10 different places in southeastern Wisconsin, but all the vodka was coming from Eastern Europe, all the rum was coming from the Caribbean, all the gin was coming from the UK, all the, bourbon was just coming from Kentucky. So it's a got him thinking, why not local spirits? Why not craft spirits?
Absolutely.
So he looked into it. Eventually got through all the paperwork and red tape and just confusion on the state level because they hadn't dealt with the distillery since pre-Prohibition. Started producing in 2006. At that time, there were less than 100 distilleries in the entire country, and now we're up to over 2,000. So we were at the forefront of the craft spirits movement. It started with vodka. That was our flagship product. It's still our number one seller, but we've expanded to offer over 30 different products and about 12 core products between bourbon, rye, rum, apple brandy, absinthe, vodka, a couple different gins as well.
Great. So yeah, we've kind of been sipping on the Roaring Dan Seavey rum. Anything you want to tell us about that one?
Roaring Dan's rum was kind of special for us. It was the first brown spirit we continually made. So it takes a long time to make whiskey. Takes a long time to kind of tune in your recipe for that. And we never wanted to do a real young whiskey. We never really wanted to do a white whiskey. So our options were limited there. But rum was relatively easy. The way we distill our rum, it drinks a little nicer when it's younger. So you can distill it in such a way that only 6 months in the cask, you got a pretty decent product. It's much older than that now, but at the get-go, we're aging it for about 6 months. So as soon as we had rum available here in our tasting room, it was great. It was our first brown spirit, so that opened up a whole new world of cocktails we could make, and we treated rum like whiskey for a good long time because that was the closest thing we had to whiskey. So we were drinking a lot of rum old fashions just because that was the best and closest thing we could get to an old fashioned.
Yeah. So obviously we get the hints of the maple syrup coming through. Do you guys use brown sugar and molasses as well?
Nope. Our process for this one is and you'll notice, maple flavored rum. I'll explain that part. So for this product, we ferment and distill table grade molasses. So we buy just a bunch of molasses, ferment and distill that. Then we add Wisconsin maple syrup from Anderson's Maple Syrup in Cumberland, Wisconsin. We add that right into the first batch of distillation. So we distill it once, comes off distilled about 40-45% alcohol by volume. Then we add the maple syrup to that. We run it through the still again. So it's infused in a distillate and then distilled again. If we fermented the maple syrup, we legally couldn't call it rum anymore. And if we added it after the second distillation, all you would taste is maple syrup. It would taste just like maple syrup. So it's our way to kind of infuse a little bit of flavor but not be overpowering. Any of that sweetness, any of that sugar you're picking up on is coming from the barrels, because when you age in a charred barrel, charring a barrel caramelizes all the natural sugars in the wood. So you're getting a lot of vanilla flavor and just kind of wood sugar. So sweetness is coming from that.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty. You definitely get a little hint. Are they oak barrels, I'm guessing?
Yep.
Okay.
We use a mix of spent bourbon barrels and brand new, fresh, charred American oak barrels.
Great. And then, I know with COVID, things have been kind of weird, but do you guys have any events coming up that you would like to let our audience know about?
I'll just say no, because I have no idea.
Right.
We'll ease into it. We do an ice cream social every year that is really popular, so we're going to try and do a to-go kit of that, because that event wasn't really about being here. It was about a special edition of ice cream coming out from Purple Door Ice Cream, which is just a couple blocks away from us. So they would make us a special ice cream for that event. They've done a gin and tonic ice cream. They've done a White Russian ice cream using our products. So we'll probably have a release of that, but it won't be a come to the distillery type event, but it'll still be something to look forward to.
Great.
Also, we have some new products coming up on the horizon, and we'll have a release day, but it won't be a big party here with cocktails. We're probably a good couple months away from really entertaining that idea.
And that's kind of what we were thinking too. Are you guys still offering tours, or when they'll open up again?
Tours are tentatively set to start again this coming Thursday. So we did open on Friday at 25% capacity. We're open through the weekend. We're taking Monday off. Then our food service tentatively will begin Friday, and our tours, limited amount of tours, will tentatively begin Thursday. We're offering a few other tour other options too, where there'll be public tours where you can buy a ticket, or you can buy a small private tour for you and 6 friends or 10 people or something like that. So you're guaranteed that it's just your group coming in, and you won't mingle with the public or anything. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. If no one takes anything, we might ease that back. If it's popular, we might add one to the day. It's all wait and see. But Thursday and Friday should be the return of tours and food.
That's great to hear. And then lastly, before we get you off the line here, we want to answer a few questions. We have a segment we always like to do with our guests to find out how Wisconsin they are.
All right.
So the first question we got for you, have you ever eaten a squeaky cheese curd?
Oh, absolutely. Same place right here, Clock Shadow Creamery, the only dairy in the city of Milwaukee. We used to pick up fresh curds every Wednesday and Friday for the tasting room. So I've had less than an hour old white and less than an hour old orange cheese curds.
So those things are really squeaking.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and then the next question, have you ever been to a Packers game?
I've been to a couple different Packer games, preseason and regular season. I would also like to add that twice in my life, maybe this is a bad thing, but twice in my life, a beer has started to freeze in my hand. Maybe that meant I wasn't drinking it fast enough. Maybe it meant it was that cold. But I was at a Packers game, took a sip of my beer, and there were little chunks in it. I was concerned. Then I figured out, oh, wow, this beer is freezing. Maybe we should, go somewhere warm.
Yeah. Have you ever worn a cheese hat?
Oh, I've definitely worn one. I've never owned one, but I've definitely worn one.
Yes, I'm kind of in the same boat. We were just joking on the other episode. I mean, we're pretty huge Packers fans, so I'd wear a cheese thong. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I would definitely rock a cheese bra.
I borrowed someone's cheese ball cap once.
Yeah.
I probably, if I ever saw one, I was drunk enough, I'd buy one of those, just cheese ball cap. But as the wedge is just so heavy, it's rather...
It's bulky.
Yes.
Have you ever been up north?
Oh, yeah, I've been up north. Oh, yeah, I go up north once in a while, Go up to Trivers and Rhinelander and, Thorpe. Big fan of Thorpe. Got to stop at the Thorpe deal, get some food. Once in a while, go way up there to Hayward, see some lumberjacking. But, I think that's up north enough.
I've been up north guy, for sure. Have you ever shot a shotgun?
Yes, I did shoot a shotgun once at a range. I didn't particularly like it. It was quite the kickback because me and my buddy took me to the range and we were just shooting, I think, 22s. He's like, I brought this so you can try it. And I did. It was a thing.
Have you ever milked a cow?
I have never milked a cow. Never had the opportunity now that I think about it. Very slim chance on a field trip. We went somewhere where maybe we saw a cow being milked, but no. To my recollection, I've never successfully milked a cow.
It's not a strike against you. Do you know what a bubbler is?
Of course I know what a bubbler is. That's
okay.
My favorite bar, Sunday night. Out of Milwaukee.
That's awesome.
Also, it's where you drink water from.
Yep. Have you ever woke up in the morning and immediately had a Bloody Mary?
Immediately, maybe once. I generally don't like Bloody Marys. I have a bit of an acid reflux situation. And tomatoes are particularly bad, so I tend to avoid Bloody Marys modernly, but I'm pretty sure at some point, yes. Oh, I can think of a time. Yes. Once I got really, really intoxicated in West Dallas, which is the place where these things happen. And unbeknownst to me, the landlords were having the house re-sided, and I didn't know that was coming. So I get to bed at 2, 3 in the morning, and all of a sudden at 7 a.m., they're siding right outside my window, tearing off old siding, putting on new siding. And I couldn't sleep, so we went to visit my buddy at the casino, and first first thing out the gate, I had a Bloody Mary day that day. So, yes.
Have you ever wore a flannel to work?
Flannel to work. I'm sure I have. I just can't think of when. I'm going to say yes, but I don't remember a specific instance.
Do you know what Cream City is?
Yes, Cream City. I'm surrounded by Cream City brick as we speak. I'm
Nice.
looking at some of our patio built right out of it. And our still downstairs actually has a Cream City brick barrier around it because it looks cool.
Do you know what a glazer is?
99% sure that's the donuts at Quick Trip.
Nice. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Have you ever been beer?
I'll ask you, have you had Glazer beer?
I have not, but was it Carbon 4?
I don't know. I've never seen it, but I'm curious about it. I've never sought it out either, but I know it exists in the world, and if I ever see one, I'll buy one.
Yeah, same here. As soon as I see that thing on the shelf, I'd buy it right away.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what a cow chip is?
Yep, that would be, it's cow poop. Does it have to be flattened? Does it naturally flatten? I know people throw them like Frisbees and compete to see who can throw them further. I don't know if they're naturally flat or they have to be flattened. Or am I thinking of cow pies?
No, you nailed it. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
I know they have like a competition up north somewhere where they toss it, which is pretty gross, but to each their own, you know. Have you ever been on a cheese tour?
Yes, Clock Shadow Creamery, same place we get our curds.
Awesome. All right, this is a really Wisconsin thing. Have you ever been to a party in a cornfield?
Nope, I have not. Well, no. No, I can't say that I have.
We're from a small town. It's a regular
Yeah.
occurrence for us, so.
I've been to parties where the lot next door was a cornfield, but it wasn't, we're going to a cornfield to have a party. We've ended up in the cornfield or in the soy field, but it was never, hey, we're meeting at such and such farm and we're going to have a party there. I know plenty of people who have.
That counts.
Oh yeah.
All right, next question. Have you ever been on a brewery tour? And obviously you have, so which one is your favorite?
It's going to sound weird. I really like the Miller Brewery Tour.
Sure.
Because it's a factory tour. And it's not, craft beer list. It's not an entertaining tour guide. It's not what people think of as a brewery tour, but it's really cool to see 500 cans of beer getting filled a minute and just truckloads of beer coming and going and just the mass scale of it. So,
we definitely don't. We definitely don't judge on the beer. I mean, we drink cheap beer, we drink craft beer. We're not here to like make fun of people. Obviously, we don't care what you drink. All right, next question. Have you ever made beer brats, and what beer do you usually use?
Yes, I've made beer brats. It's an essential ingredient in my beer brat chili. I use garage-aged Pabst Blue Ribbon. So I keep tall boys of Pabst in my garage for many, many years. Let them go through the season, let them get real funky, and then hopefully, if I can age them 2 years, that's the beer I use to cook my brats in.
That's awesome. Have you ever had a true Wisconsin old-fashioned? Obviously, it's a dumb question, but...
Yes, I will probably had every version except for the people who, for some reason, like olives in there. I've never had a Wisconsin-style old-fashioned with olives, but it's popular. But I've had sweet, I've had sour, I've had press, I've had brandy, I've had bourbon, blended whiskey, everything you can think of, except for olives.
Next question. Have you ever drank through an entire day?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Many times in Vegas, but here as well, I'd say, I can remember sometimes going to like a Badger football game, starting, around 8 a.m. and going all day. And one St. Patrick's Day, we came within an hour of opening and closing a bar.
Oh.
So we were there from 10 a.m. to 12:30. So within 2 hours of closing the bar, and I count that as all day drinking.
Yeah, that's an accomplishment. Day. That's good.
Have you ever stood outside where there's a tornado warning going off?
Yeah, I've done that. I'm a bit of a weather nerd, and no, it's over by Blue Mountain. We're safe right here. By half a mile. I'm just like, no big deal. I'll ignore that. So, yeah, a couple different times. But I pretty tuned into where the bad weather would or wouldn't be. It's a lot different now. I mean, when I was younger, a whole county would be under a tornado warning. Even if there's, it might not be raining in Franklin, Wisconsin, but around here is getting a tornado, but they'd both be under the same warning.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ross, do you know what a fib is?
Yes. A friendly Illinois brother.
Oh, come
nice.
on.
I have a lot of guests who come to the distillery. A lot of friendly Illinois brothers.
Yeah.
Coming here, and I greet them very nicely.
Absolutely.
Wink.
Yeah, we just wanted to see your response on that one.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a tractor pull?
Yes, I've been to a tractor pull. I went to one at the Bradley Center a long time ago.
All right, I got one more question for you, and then we'll let you go. Have you ever driven a snowmobile to a bar?
I have never driven a snowmobile to a bar. That's how unfortunate. I apologize. I have not.
Thank you so much for your time today, Ross. It was awesome.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
And hopefully we'll be able to stop in there soon. We're thinking about doing a live show one of these days, and if you guys will have us, we'd love to come out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, come on down. We'll talk Wisconsin drinking history. We'll talk cocktail history. We'll talk about the old-fashioned. Also, I know you're talking about Roaring Dan today. It just so happens tomorrow we're bottling up some of our cask-strength bourbon named after Dirty Helen Cromwell, who probably lived more of a notorious life than Roaring Dan himself. She was a brothel owner, bar owner. She knew Al Capone, and she ran a bar here in Milwaukee that only served bourbon and scotch. That's it. You had two choices, one or the other.
Wow.
So she's an interesting character. I would recommend looking a little bit into her for future episodes because she fits right in line with the man, the myth, the legend, Roaring Dan. She is, in her own right, the woman, the myth, the legend, Dirty Helen Cromwell.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem at all. Enjoy your day.
All right, you too.
You as well.
Thanks again, guys. This was episode 3. Honestly, I can't say enough about all of our viewership so far and all the great feedback that we've had. I just wanted to remind you, if you haven't already, click subscribe on the YouTube, like, review, anything you guys can do to further advance what we do here. We really enjoy providing some sort of entertainment to anybody who was willing to listen. All right, that concludes this episode of Wisconsin Drunken History Podcast.
If you enjoyed this vulgar display of Wisconsin, we recommend you subscribe via SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn.
Also, leave us a review on any one of those above-mentioned sites, and we can read one at the end of every show. Follow us on social media, and feel free to reach out, especially if there is a piece of history or weird news you'd love us to share or research, as well as highlight some local artists or music. Our website is projectcapestudio.com.
I'd also like to thank my friend and past coworker, Steph Skiback, for providing us with awesome podcast cover art, as well as the Dang It's for intro and outro music, and all of you for listening. As always,
Watch out for deer on the way home.